I had always been the type of person who looked for a way to do things differently. Growing up in a small, modest neighborhood, I didn't have much, but I was determined to make something of myself. I didn't know exactly what that something was at the time, but I knew it would have to be big. Little did I know that the road I was about to take would lead to success that I hadn't even imagined. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing, a field that seemed perfect for someone who liked to think outside the box. However, the reality of the job market hit me hard. I was applying to dozens of companies, attending interviews that all ended in the same response. "Thanks, but we've decided to go in a different direction." My bank account was dwindling, and the bills were piling up. But I refused to give up. One day, I had a conversation with a friend of mine from college who was in the tech industry. He had started working for a small software company that was on the verge of something big, but they were struggling with user engagement. He mentioned that the company had no clear strategy for how to market their product effectively. That's when an idea clicked in my head. What if I could help them? What if I could take my marketing skills and apply them to this tech startup, showing them how to reach their audience in a way they hadn't even thought of? I immediately started brainstorming ideas and reached out to my friend. He seemed intrigued and put me in touch with the CEO. The conversation was brief but positive, and before I knew it, I was on board to work with them on a trial basis. At first, things were tough. The company had a small budget, and I was working out of my apartment, doing everything from brainstorming marketing campaigns to designing social media posts. But I was fueled by a sense of purpose and determination. I knew that if I could just show them results, I would prove my worth. The first major campaign I ran was an Instagram promotion aimed at attracting users to their platform. The product was a time management app, and I figured the best way to sell it was by focusing on the pain points of our target audience: busy professionals and students. I created a series of engaging posts, shared user testimonials, and even collaborated with a few influencers to get the word out. The results were staggering. In just a month, the company saw a 40% increase in active users. The CEO was impressed. He offered me a full-time position, and suddenly, my world started to change. I went from barely scraping by to earning a steady income, working with a team that was as passionate as I was about growing the business. Things were moving fast, and I was learning more each day about how to run a company, handle customer feedback, and scale an operation. But the real breakthrough came when I started pushing the envelope even further. I was noticing gaps in the way the company was positioning its product. There were features that could make the app more interactive and valuable to users, but no one had thought about how to leverage them. I spent weeks researching, talking to customers, and learning more about the industry. Eventually, I came up with a new feature, a productivity dashboard that tracked users' goals and progress. This dashboard would let them set targets, measure their success, and see detailed analytics about how they were spending their time. It was exactly the type of tool that would keep people engaged and give them a reason to use the app every day. I pitched the idea to the CEO, and he was on board right away. We brought in the development team to make it happen, and within a few months, we had a prototype. It was sleek, functional, and, most importantly, exactly what our users wanted. When we launched the new feature, user engagement skyrocketed. Our active user base grew by 150%, and retention rates improved drastically. Investors took notice, and soon, we were able to secure the funding we needed to scale the business even further. By now, I had become a key player in the company. I wasn't just doing marketing anymore. I was part of the strategy team, helping to shape the direction of the company. The once small startup was starting to grow into a legitimate player in the tech industry. And then, the real challenge hit. We had to scale. Scaling is one of the hardest parts of any business, and I quickly learned that it's not just about getting more customers. It's about maintaining the quality of your product and service while growing your team. We faced bottlenecks in almost every area of the company: customer support, operations, and even product development. It was a constant juggling act, and at times, it felt like we were trying to build a plane while flying it. But I had learned one important thing along the way: never stop adapting. I knew that if we could keep pushing forward, keep innovating, and keep delivering value to our users, we could overcome any obstacle. We invested heavily in automation, outsourcing tasks where necessary, and streamlining our internal processes. We expanded the marketing team and brought in people who were just as hungry to grow the business as I was. We even started to hire customer success managers to ensure that users were getting the most out of our product. And then, Just when everything seemed to be going perfectly, the market shifted. New competitors entered the space, and there was a flood of similar apps flooding the market. It felt like the entire landscape was changing overnight. It was a wake-up call for us. The next few months were stressful as we worked to differentiate ourselves from the competition. We had to double down on innovation and customer service, ensuring that our product remained the best on the market. We rolled out new features, revamped our marketing approach, and listened to user feedback more than ever. Looking back, that period was one of the most challenging times of my career. But it was also when I learned the most about business. I learned that success isn't about having the best product or the most money. It's about being able to adapt to change, pivot when necessary, and always keep your customers at the center of your strategy. Fast forward a few years, and the company is now one of the leading players in the productivity app space. We've expanded globally, attracted millions of users, and even been featured in major tech publications. I'm now in a leadership role, overseeing a team of incredible individuals who share the same passion for helping people manage their time and reach their goals. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every single challenge. I went from a person struggling to find a job to running a successful company that is making a real impact. The road was long, but every step taught me something valuable. Most importantly, I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't just about building a business. It's about building resilience, adapting to change, and never losing sight of the bigger picture. And to anyone out there who's struggling or doubting their potential, just know that it's not the setbacks that define you. It's how you rise from them. Success isn't a straight line, but if you stay focused and keep pushing forward, you'll get there. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I remember the exact moment I decided to take the plunge into entrepreneurship. It was a cold winter evening in 2015, and I was sitting in my tiny one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, staring at my laptop screen. I had just received an email from a recruiter offering me a well-paying position as a marketing manager for a tech company. On paper, it seemed like a dream job, but deep down, I knew I wasn't excited about it. The thought of working for someone else for the next 30 years made my stomach churn. I had always been the kind of person who liked to create things. Even as a kid, I was always building makeshift gadgets, drawing new designs, or brainstorming ways to improve existing products. But I never thought it was something I could turn into a real business. My parents were from a working-class background, and entrepreneurship was a concept that seemed more like a fantasy than a viable path. However, that night changed everything. I closed my laptop, walked into my kitchen, and poured myself a glass of wine. I couldn't help but feel frustrated by the thought of living an average life, stuck in a cycle of working for someone else. The wine didn't help, but my thoughts became clearer. What if I could take control of my own future? What if I could start something of my own and build it from the ground up? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I called my best friend, Alex, who had been talking about starting a business for years. He was an idea guy, always brainstorming the next big thing, but he had never pulled the trigger on anything. I pitched him my idea, an online platform that connected local artisans and small business owners with customers looking for unique, handcrafted products. It wasn't a revolutionary idea, but it was something I was passionate about. Alex was immediately on board, and we began to work on our plan. We spent hours every week brainstorming, researching, and fine-tuning our concept. We scraped together whatever savings we had and launched our website, which we called Crafted Connections. The initial version was far from polished, but it was live. The excitement was overwhelming. We spent our nights cold calling local artisans, trying to convince them to list their products on our platform. Most of them were skeptical, but a few took the leap. We started getting small orders, but the growth was slow. The first few months were brutal. We barely made enough money to cover the costs of hosting the website and marketing. We were working full-time jobs during the day and hustling on our business at night. Sleep became a luxury, and weekends were spent updating the site, answering customer inquiries, and figuring out how to improve our sales. There were times when I thought about giving up, especially when we ran into technical problems or when customers complained about slow shipping or poor product quality. But we pushed through. One of the biggest turning points came when we finally secured a partnership with a popular craft fair in the city. It was a small step, but it gave us the credibility we needed to start attracting more customers. We also began investing more in digital marketing, running Facebook and Instagram ads to reach a larger audience. Slowly but surely, our customer base started to grow. We were no longer just a couple of guys with an idea. We were becoming a real business. In 2017, 2 years after launching, we hit a major milestone. We broke even. It wasn't much, but it felt like a huge win. We had finally covered our costs and were starting to generate some profit. We celebrated with a few drinks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There was still so much to do. We needed to scale, improve our platform, and expand our reach. We started focusing on improving the user experience. We redesigned the website to make it more intuitive and user-friendly. We added features like customer reviews, better product images, and an easy checkout process. On the back end, we implemented an inventory management system that allowed our vendors to track their stock in real time, reducing errors and improving shipping times. The changes made a big difference. Our conversion rate increased, and we started seeing more repeat customers. By 2019, we were generating 6 figures in revenue, and we had a small but dedicated team of employees. We had to hire customer support staff, a marketing manager, and a developer to help us keep up with the growing demand. I felt proud of what we had built, but I also knew we had to keep innovating if we wanted to stay competitive. That's when we decided to expand into international markets. The idea of going global was terrifying, but it also felt like the natural next step. We began researching how to ship internationally and which markets would be the most receptive to handmade goods. We also worked on building relationships with international artisans. The logistics were complicated, and we hit some snags along the way, but eventually we launched in Europe and Canada. The response was better than we expected. Sales exploded, and we were able to reinvest the profits into growing the business even further. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. We faced challenges with managing international orders, dealing with customs regulations, and maintaining quality control. There were moments of doubt, especially when things didn't go as planned, but we pushed through. Looking back, I realize how much of our success came down to persistence. We were never the smartest or most talented people in the room, but we were determined to make it work. In 2022, after 7 years of building crafted connections, we sold the company for a 7-figure sum. It was a bittersweet moment. I had poured so much of myself into the business, and it felt strange to walk away. But I knew it was time to move on to new ventures. Now, I'm working on a new project, an app that helps freelancers connect with clients looking for short-term work. It's early days, and I'm starting from scratch again, but I'm excited. Entrepreneurship is never easy, and there's always more to learn. But the journey has been worth it, and I'm proud of what we accomplished with Crafted Connections. It taught me that with hard work, persistence, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. If there's one piece of advice I could give to aspiring entrepreneurs, it would be this: don't wait for the perfect moment to start. It will never come. Start small, make mistakes, learn from them, and keep going. The road is long, but the rewards are worth it. It was the summer of 2017 when I first stumbled upon what would later become the backbone of my entrepreneurial journey. I was working a 9-to-5 job in an office, surrounded by beige cubicles and the constant hum of printers and keyboards. My job was decent enough, but I always felt that something was missing. The routine was draining, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for more. But, like many people, I wasn't sure what that more looked like. One evening, while browsing through Reddit, I came across a post about someone who had built a successful e-commerce business from the ground up. The story seemed almost too good to be true, yet it sparked something inside me. I spent the next several hours diving deeper into the world of online businesses, reading every success story and failure alike. It was a rabbit hole, but the further I went, the more convinced I became that I could do it too. I wasn't sure what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew one thing for certain. It was going to be something online. That's when I started brainstorming ideas. I wanted to create a product that was unique, but still in demand. I didn't have much capital to start with, and I didn't have a background in design or manufacturing. But I had a lot of ideas and an unrelenting determination to make something work. I decided to go with a simple product: phone accessories. Everyone had a phone, and everyone needed accessories. It was a saturated market, sure, but there was always room for something fresh. After a few weeks of research, I narrowed it down to a specific niche: eco-friendly phone cases. At the time, the demand for sustainable products was on the rise, and I felt this could be my ticket in. Plus, I liked the idea of contributing to the environment in some small way. The next few months were a whirlwind of trial and error. I spent countless nights researching manufacturers, learning about logistics, and setting up my website. I didn't have a clue what I was doing at first, but I was determined to make it work. I was burning the candle at both ends, working my day job while trying to get my side hustle off the ground. Every evening after work, I would sit at my desk, brainstorming marketing strategies, designing ads, and building my brand from scratch. There were moments when I wanted to quit, especially when things didn't go as planned. But I always reminded myself of the bigger picture. Finally, after months of hard work, my website was live, and my first batch of eco-friendly phone cases arrived. The feeling of seeing my product for the first time was indescribable. I was ecstatic, but also terrified. I had spent so much time, money, and energy on this project, and now it was out in the world for people to see. I launched the website with a small, targeted ad campaign on social media. I had no clue whether it would work, but I had to try. Days went by, and the orders trickled in slowly. It wasn't the flood of sales I had hoped for, but it was a start. Each order felt like a small victory, and I poured everything I had into making sure each customer had a great experience. I answered every email personally, wrote handwritten thank you notes, and worked hard to get positive reviews. But it didn't take long before I realized that I had underestimated how much work it would take to build a brand. Marketing wasn't as simple as just running ads. I needed to build trust, create content, and engage with my audience. I started learning about SEO, content marketing, and influencer partnerships. Slowly but surely, the orders began to pick up. My phone cases were selling, but more importantly, my brand was starting to gain traction. I realized that the more I invested in my business, the more it started to pay off. But with growth came new challenges. My initial supplier couldn't keep up with demand, and I had to find new manufacturers. Shipping times were becoming an issue, and I had to work out kinks in my fulfillment process. I spent weeks negotiating contracts, sorting out logistics, and trying to find the most efficient way to get my products to customers. It was exhausting, and there were moments when I thought about giving up. But every time I hit a roadblock, I reminded myself why I started this in the first place: for the freedom, the opportunity, and the chance to build something I could be proud of. By the end of 2018, I had quit my 9-to-5 job to focus full-time on my business. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I was scared, uncertain, and still learning the ropes of entrepreneurship. But I had reached a point where the business was making enough revenue for me to sustain myself and reinvest in growth. It was a leap of faith, but it was also the most exciting and rewarding decision I'd ever made. Over the next few years, my business grew exponentially. I expanded my product line to include other eco-friendly accessories, such as reusable water bottles and biodegradable phone chargers. I built a small but dedicated team to help with marketing, customer service, and operations. I learned how to scale, manage finances, and optimize my supply chain. I made mistakes, of course, but I learned from every setback and used it to improve. One of the best parts of this journey has been the community I've built around my brand. I get messages from customers all the time, thanking me for creating a product that aligns with their values. Some even share how my eco-friendly phone cases have helped them reduce their plastic waste. It's humbling to know that my business has made a small positive impact on the environment, and it motivates me to keep pushing forward. Now, in 2025, my business is thriving. We've expanded into new markets and have a solid presence in multiple countries. The lessons I've learned along the way have been invaluable, and while the path to success wasn't easy, it's been incredibly rewarding. I've gone from being an employee stuck in a cubicle to running my own company that's doing good for the world. Looking back, I never would have imagined that a late-night Reddit post could spark the journey that led me here. It's a reminder that opportunities can come from the most unexpected places. I didn't have any formal training in business, and I certainly didn't have a roadmap to follow. But I had a vision, a passion, and an unwavering belief that I could make it happen. And that belief, combined with hard work and perseverance, has made all the difference. The one thing I would say to anyone thinking about starting their own business is this: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect time to start. Just begin, learn as you go, and keep moving forward. If I can do it, so can you. I never thought I'd be where I am today. In fact, if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be running my own successful business, I probably would have laughed in your face. But now, here I am, an entrepreneur in the tech space, owning a company that's growing rapidly, with a team of amazing people who believe in the vision. It hasn't been easy, but the journey has been nothing short of transformative. Let me take you through how it all happened. It all started when I was in college. I was studying engineering, a degree that was supposed to set me up for a stable, predictable career. But I always had this nagging feeling that there was something more. I would look at my professors, who were brilliant in their own right, but I noticed something that didn't sit well with me. They were experts in their fields, yet most of them had no real-world experience. I knew I wasn't cut out for a job that involved sitting behind a desk all day, working on theoretical concepts. That's when the itch to create something on my own started to grow. At the time, I was working as an intern at a small tech startup. The company was in its early stages, and I had the chance to witness firsthand the chaos of starting something from nothing. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. The founder of the company, let's call him Dave, was a visionary. He had this unique ability to turn seemingly crazy ideas into reality, and I admired him for that. But there was something that struck me about his journey. He had no business background, no formal training in how to run a company, and yet he had built something that was on the verge of being a major player in the tech world. Watching Dave made me realize something crucial. Success in business didn't always require a degree in business or decades of experience. It required vision, determination, and the willingness to fail. I started thinking, what if I could do this too? What if I could create something of my own, something that could help people and disrupt the industry? The idea stayed in my mind, but I wasn't ready to take the leap yet. I finished my degree, got a full-time job at a larger company, and settled into the predictable rhythm of corporate life. I was making decent money, and for a while, I thought that was enough. But deep down, I wasn't fulfilled. I kept daydreaming about the startup life, the excitement, the risk, and the potential rewards. One night, after a particularly draining day at work, I decided it was time to make a change. I was going to quit my job and start my own business. The first few months were brutal. I had no clear roadmap, no guaranteed success, and no funding. All I had was an idea, a tech product that could simplify the way businesses manage their inventory. I'd noticed that small to medium-sized businesses struggled with inventory management, often relying on outdated software or even pen and paper. I believed there was a better way to do it, something that could be more intuitive, more efficient, and cost-effective. So, I did what any young, ambitious entrepreneur would do. I Googled everything I needed to know. I spent countless hours reading articles, watching YouTube tutorials, and learning about business development, software engineering, and digital marketing. I knew nothing about coding when I started, but I taught myself the basics, enough to create a prototype of the software. I spent about 6 months working on the prototype while still working a full-time job. Those months were exhausting. I would come home from work, have dinner, and then work on my project until 2 or 3 a.m. It wasn't sustainable, but I was determined. Eventually, I quit my job and went all in on my startup. I hit the ground running, contacting potential customers, and pitching my product. At first, I got rejected a lot. People didn't know me, didn't trust me, and didn't believe my software could change the way they did business. The early days were filled with disappointment, but I didn't give up. I tweaked the product, listened to feedback, and kept refining. Slowly but surely, people started to see the value in what I was offering. But the real breakthrough came when I managed to secure a small round of funding. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I had a meeting with an investor who seemed genuinely interested in my idea. He didn't offer me a lot, but it was enough to get me started. With the funding, I was able to hire my first employee, a brilliant developer who helped me scale the product faster than I could have on my own. Having a team made a huge difference. It wasn't just about coding anymore. It was about building a culture, solving real problems, and delivering value to our customers. The business grew steadily over the next few years. We refined our product, made key partnerships, and expanded our team. The work was still hard, but it felt different now. It felt like we were building something meaningful, something that was actually helping people. We became known in our niche for delivering results, and that reputation began to fuel our growth. But with success came new challenges. The competition in the tech space was fierce, and there were moments when I questioned whether we could keep up. We had cash flow issues, staffing challenges, and the pressure to constantly innovate. There were days when I wanted to throw in the towel. But looking back, I'm grateful for those moments of doubt because they taught me something vital. Resilience is the key to success in entrepreneurship. There were so many times when we felt like we were on the brink of failure, but it was during those times that we grew the most. Fast forward to today, and we're a thriving company with a solid customer base, a growing team, and a product that's making a real difference in the world. We've faced our fair share of ups and downs, but we've come out stronger every time. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that entrepreneurship isn't about having all the answers right away. It's about having the courage to take that first step, to embrace the unknown, and to keep moving forward no matter what. Looking back, I can't help but smile at how far we've come. The kid who once dreamed of being an entrepreneur is now running a successful business. And while the journey has been challenging, I wouldn't change a thing. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the success or the money. It's about the person you become along the way. I've always had a love-hate relationship with the idea of success. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, I was raised by parents who worked 9-to-5 jobs, but always emphasized the value of hard work, honesty, and doing the right thing. They weren't entrepreneurs, and neither was anyone in our family. My dad worked at a car dealership, and my mom was a high school teacher. But even though their jobs were stable, I could see how exhausted they were by the end of every week. I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want to work for someone else, grind through life with little recognition or excitement. I wanted to build something on my own, something that could give me financial freedom and, more importantly, time freedom. I started my journey in my early 20s, unsure of what I wanted to do, but driven by the idea that I had to be an entrepreneur. I'd already gone through college, but I didn't really fit in with the idea of working in a cubicle or going through the motions in a traditional job. During college, I had a few side hustles, selling tech gadgets online, doing freelance writing, and even flipping furniture I found on Craigslist. I wasn't making huge amounts of money, but I loved the idea of turning a small investment into something greater. It was in my senior year when I came up with what I thought would be my big idea. I had been to a lot of parties, met a lot of people, and one thing that stood out to me was the lack of affordable, high-quality snacks available for busy professionals and college students. The snacks that were popular at the time were overly processed, full of preservatives, and just didn't feel good to eat, especially when you were juggling work, school, or a busy social life. I figured, why not create something that was healthy, delicious, and could be consumed on the go? I started researching. I spent hours reading about the snack industry, health trends, and consumer behavior. I realized that there was a growing demand for health-conscious food options, especially among people who didn't have the time to cook elaborate meals. I worked on creating recipes, experimenting with different ingredients, and testing them out with friends. After several months, I had come up with a snack bar that was healthy, filled with protein, fiber, and natural ingredients. The best part? It tasted amazing. Now, all I had to do was sell it. And this is where I hit my first roadblock. I didn't have any real business experience. I didn't have funding. I didn't know how to get the product in front of customers. But I was determined. I started by creating a small batch of snack bars in my kitchen and reached out to local stores, health food shops, and gyms. I remember the first store that agreed to sell my product. It was a small, family-owned health food store in my city. They were skeptical, but they gave me a chance, and I will never forget that moment. My product was on the shelves. I started small, selling my bars at local farmers markets, setting up a booth at small events, and handing out free samples at gyms. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't making a lot of money at first, but I was learning the ropes of business. I was figuring out packaging, logistics, inventory, and how to market my product. I learned how to take constructive criticism and use it to improve. Each sale, each positive review, felt like a small victory. But I still had a long way to go. Things started to get serious when I started reaching out to larger retailers. I knew that getting into a big chain could skyrocket my business, but I also knew it would take a lot of convincing. I got rejected more times than I can count. It was brutal, but I kept pushing forward. I sent email after email, called every distributor, and attended industry events where I could meet people in the food business. Eventually, after a year of relentless pitching, I got my first big break. A regional supermarket chain agreed to place my snack bars in 20 of their stores. It felt like a huge win, But this was just the beginning. Getting the product into stores was one thing, but making sure it sold was another. I had to refine my branding, improve the packaging, and, most importantly, increase visibility. I began running ads, working with influencers in the health and fitness space, and creating content that spoke to my target audience. Slowly but surely, sales started to pick up. But this success came with its own set of challenges. The demand for my snack bars was growing, but so were my expenses. The more I sold, the more I needed to produce, and the more I needed to hire. Cash flow was always tight. I had to reinvest almost every penny I earned back into the business to keep up with production. I took out small loans, worked long hours to keep things moving, and often had to make difficult decisions about how to allocate resources. It was stressful, but I knew this was part of the entrepreneurial grind. In the next few years, things started to snowball. I got the product into more and more stores, including big box retailers, and my snack bars became a recognizable brand in the health food space. With more visibility came more opportunities. I started getting offers from venture capitalists and private investors who wanted to take my business to the next level. But after careful consideration, I turned most of them down. I didn't want to lose control of my vision. I wanted to grow the company on my own terms, even if it meant going at a slower pace. The turning point came when I decided to launch an online store. E-commerce was booming, and I knew that this would open up new revenue streams. The launch wasn't without its hurdles. There were supply chain issues, technical glitches with the website, and the challenge of driving traffic to the site. But the potential was clear. Sales online grew exponentially, and soon I was shipping snack bars all over the country. I invested in a subscription model where customers could receive their favorite flavors every month, which boosted loyalty and created a steady revenue stream. Fast forward to today, and my snack company is no longer a small startup. We now employ over 50 people. Our products are available in thousands of stores across the country, and we've expanded into new markets like protein powders and other healthy snacks. I've learned so much along the way about resilience, innovation, and the importance of trusting the process. The road wasn't easy, but it was worth every challenge. It took years of hard work, countless failures, and a deep belief in the vision I had when I first started. Now, looking back, I realized that what I learned most was not how to make a successful product, but how to believe in myself when everything seemed impossible. Entrepreneurship is a journey, not a destination, and if you can stick with it long enough, you'll get there. I'm still learning, still growing, and still facing challenges. But every obstacle is an opportunity to push through and keep moving forward. To anyone out there thinking of starting their own business, my advice is simple: don't give up. Every step you take brings you closer to your goals. Keep believing, keep hustling, and eventually, you'll see the fruits of your labor. I still remember the day it all started, a day that would eventually change my life forever, in ways I never could have imagined. It was 2014, and I was 24 years old, working a dead-end job as a barista at a coffee shop in my hometown. I had a degree in business but no clear direction. My friends were either in graduate school or climbing the corporate ladder, while I was stuck behind a counter making lattes, daydreaming about what could be. I wasn't lazy, and I wasn't without ambition, but for some reason, I just couldn't figure out how to get my foot in the door of a real career. One particularly slow shift, when the cafe was practically empty, I decided to try something different. I've been reading a lot about e-commerce and dropshipping on forums and blogs, and the more I read, the more it seemed like an accessible way to make money. People were talking about creating online stores that would run themselves while they traveled or worked on other projects. It sounded like the dream. I decided I had nothing to lose. I didn't have a lot of savings, but I had enough to scrape together $500 to buy a domain and pay for the basic Shopify plan. At that moment, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to market, I didn't know how to find suppliers, and I definitely didn't know how to drive traffic to a website. But something inside me told me to just go for it. I created a store called Tech Trends, selling the latest gadgets and accessories that were starting to pop up all over social media. I had no real strategy, but I spent hours designing a site that looked clean, choosing products from AliExpress, and writing descriptions that I thought sounded good enough. I launched the site, posted it on my personal social media accounts, and waited. I expected nothing, and for the first week, that's exactly what I got: nothing. I told myself to be patient, but I knew I couldn't just sit around. I started watching every YouTube video I could find about marketing, SEO, and social media advertising. Every night after my shift at the coffee shop, I stayed up late, reading articles and experimenting with Facebook ads. I spent a lot of money on ads that led to nowhere, but I learned valuable lessons with every failure. By the second month, I had made a few sales. I was thrilled, not because it was a lot of money, but because it was proof that the idea could work. Slowly, I started refining my approach. I focused on one product at a time, learned how to use influencers to promote my items, and learned more about targeting on Facebook. With each new product I launched, I got better at driving traffic to the site and making sales. Then, in late 2015, everything changed. I was working my usual shift, and I got an alert on my phone that my Shopify store had made a $100 sale while I was serving coffee. That was the moment I realized that this online store thing could actually be real. Over the next several months, I managed to consistently make sales, nothing crazy, but enough to cover my bills and make me believe I could eventually quit my job. I still worked at the coffee shop, mostly out of habit and because I didn't have enough confidence to go full-time with the business yet. In the middle of 2016, I made a decision that would change everything. I took the plunge and quit my job to go full-time with my store. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was onto something. I lived frugally, kept my overhead low, and invested every dollar I made back into the business, whether it was for advertising or product research. I spent countless hours learning everything I could about e-commerce, digital marketing, and branding. Slowly, I grew the business into something that could actually support me. In 2017, after a lot of trial and error, I hit my first big breakthrough. I launched a viral product, a new type of phone case that had built-in solar panels to charge your phone on the go. I didn't invent the product, but I found it at a small supplier and marketed it as something that would change the way people interacted with their devices outdoors. It blew up on Instagram. Influencers and bloggers shared it, and the sales came in faster than I could handle. My store went from making a few $100s a month to several thousand in just a few weeks. But with success came new challenges. My initial supplier couldn't keep up with demand, and I had to quickly find another one. I also had to scale up my operations, hire customer service reps, and deal with returns and complaints. There were days when I felt like everything was falling apart. But instead of giving up, I doubled down. I started building a team, outsourcing tasks I couldn't handle, and focusing on growing the brand. By the end of 2017, my business was making over $100,000 a month in revenue. The success I had with that phone case led me to explore more niche markets and product categories. I expanded my store to include other innovative tech products, and I began creating my own designs and private labeling products. I learned the importance of creating a brand, not just a generic online store. I invested in building a strong social media presence and establishing a community around my products. By 2019, my store was making millions a year, and I was no longer the kid behind the counter at a coffee shop. I had built something real, something that gave me financial freedom and a sense of purpose. But it wasn't just about the money. What I found most fulfilling was knowing that I had created something from scratch. I had taken a risk, failed countless times, but kept going. Of course, like any entrepreneur, there were times when I doubted myself, times when I thought about quitting. But every time I got close to giving up, I reminded myself of where I started. I wasn't born into wealth. I didn't have any special connections. I just had an idea and the persistence to keep working at it, even when things didn't go as planned. Fast forward to 2025, and my company has grown even further. We now employ dozens of people, and our products are sold worldwide. But I never forget where I came from or the struggle it took to get here. Every year, I try to give back by helping other aspiring entrepreneurs. I speak at conferences, mentor young people starting their own businesses, and donate to causes that help underserved communities learn about e-commerce and business. Sometimes I still think about my time as a barista, when my biggest worry was remembering someone's coffee order. That life feels like a distant memory, but I've never lost the sense of wonder I felt back then. The feeling of knowing that anything is possible if you're willing to work for it. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm excited to keep learning, keep growing, and keep building. And maybe, just maybe, my story will inspire someone else to take that first step, because if I can do it, anyone can. I always thought I had everything figured out, like most people who think they're set in life. But let me tell you, life has a funny way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. I was working in a corporate job, sitting behind a desk for 12 hours a day, staring at spreadsheets and pretending I was busy, when all I really wanted was freedom. I was doing what everyone told me I should do, climbing the ladder, making money, following the rules. But deep down, I always had this itch I couldn't scratch. I wanted to be my own boss, create something from nothing, and make a real impact. It wasn't until I hit my breaking point that things started to change. The job wasn't bad in itself. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and the work wasn't too demanding. But there was something about the repetitive nature of it that gnawed at my soul. I'd wake up, get dressed in the same suit, and drive the same route to the office every single day. It felt like I was just going through the motions, a hamster running in circles. I was stuck in the rat race, and it felt like there was no escape. One evening, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through social media, when I saw a post about an entrepreneur who started their own business with almost nothing. The post was full of inspiring quotes and success stories, and something about it hit me hard. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. Why couldn't that be me? What was stopping me from taking the leap? That night, I decided to make a change. I didn't know what that change would look like, but I knew I couldn't keep living the same life anymore. So I spent the next few weeks doing research. I watched YouTube videos, read books, and followed successful entrepreneurs on social media. I spent hours every day consuming everything I could about how to start a business. But as the days went on, I realized one thing: there was no perfect time. There was no perfect plan. The only way to start was to just do it. I didn't have a clear idea of what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew that I wanted to create something that solved a problem. I thought about my own struggles with finding affordable, high-quality office supplies, staplers, pens, notebooks. The kind of stuff I used every day but had a hard time finding without paying a premium. That's when it hit me. Why not start an e-commerce business selling office supplies at better prices? It was a simple idea, but that's exactly what I needed. Something manageable, something I could start without needing a huge investment. I knew I could find suppliers online and sell directly to customers through a website. The idea seemed perfect: low overhead, scalable, and the kind of business I could run from anywhere. But there was a problem. I had no idea how to build a website. I spent the next few months learning everything I could about website design, e-commerce platforms, and digital marketing. I took online courses, Googled every question I had, and reached out to people who had been where I was. Slowly but surely, I learned how to build a website and set up an online store. The whole process felt overwhelming at times, but I was determined. I couldn't go back to my old life, to that soul-sucking job. After what felt like an eternity of trial and error, my website was live. I still remember the day I hit the publish button. My heart raced, and I couldn't believe that I had actually done it. I thought to myself, this is it. There's no turning back now. But the excitement quickly faded when I realized that just launching a website wasn't enough. I had no customers. I had no traffic. I was basically shouting into the void. The next few months were a blur of frustration. I tried Facebook ads, Instagram posts, and even cold emails. Nothing seemed to work. The money I'd saved up for the business was quickly disappearing, and I was starting to feel the pressure. I remember sitting at my kitchen table late one night, looking at my bank account, feeling like I was on the verge of failure. I had no income, no sales, and no idea what to do next. I had a decision to make: give up or double down. I chose to double down. I reevaluated everything I had done and realized I was trying to do too much at once. I wasn't focusing enough on what mattered: finding customers. So I narrowed my efforts down to one thing: social media. I focused on building my presence on Instagram and LinkedIn. I started creating content about office productivity, organizing your workspace, and the benefits of having good supplies. Slowly but surely, people started noticing. It wasn't immediate, but it was a start. A few sales trickled in, then a few more. I began building relationships with customers, learning what they wanted, and adapting my product line to meet those needs. I even partnered with influencers in the office supply niche to help spread the word. Then, things started to click. Sales started coming in regularly, and I was able to reinvest that money into growing the business. I hired a small team to help with customer service and order fulfillment, and I upgraded the website to make it more user-friendly. As the months passed, I refined my marketing strategies and scaled my operations. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of bumps along the way. But one thing kept me going: the belief that I was building something real. I had gone from a corporate drone to the owner of a growing business. The freedom I had longed for was finally mine, and it felt incredible. Now, a few years later, my business has grown far beyond what I could have ever imagined. I'm not just selling office supplies. I'm creating a brand that people trust. I have a dedicated team, a loyal customer base, and the satisfaction of knowing that I built this from the ground up. I'm living a life I never thought was possible, and it all started with one simple decision: to take the leap. Looking back, I see that the biggest challenge wasn't figuring out how to start the business. It was overcoming the fear of failure, of not knowing what would happen next. But I learned that fear is just a signal that you're on the right path. The real failure comes when you don't try at all. If you're sitting there right now, wondering if you should take the leap, let me tell you this: do it. The time will never feel perfect, and the road will never be easy. But if you believe in yourself and push through the tough times, it will be worth it. Don't let fear control your life. You have the power to create something incredible. All it takes is a decision to get started. I was never the type to dream big. Growing up in a small town, I watched most people just go through the motions. They get a steady job, work 9 to 5, and get by. I followed the same path. After high school, I went to a local community college, studied business, and landed a job at a regional marketing firm right after graduation. Nothing fancy, but it was stable. I had a roof over my head, food on the table, and I was just like everyone else, content. At least, that's what I thought. However, something shifted about 2 years into that job. I started working long hours, dealing with clients who would constantly demand more for less, and spending my weekends responding to emails. It wasn't exactly glamorous, and it definitely wasn't the work-life balance I had envisioned for myself. As much as I hated to admit it, the routine was slowly draining me. I had started feeling trapped. One late night, I was sitting at my desk, mindlessly scrolling through some social media when I came across an article about side hustles. It was a random read at first, but something about it caught my attention. People were starting businesses with minimal investment, selling products, and making real money. I kept reading, and the more I read, the more my mind started to spin with possibilities. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about the idea of starting my own business. I had no plan, no blueprint, and no clear vision of what I wanted to do, but I knew something had to change. I wasn't getting any younger, and if I didn't try now, I would always wonder, what if? So, I did what anyone would do. I started to research. I devoured every article and podcast I could find on entrepreneurship. I quickly realized that the first step was finding something I could sell, something that had potential, but didn't require a huge upfront investment. I knew I didn't have the capital to start a brick-and-mortar business or buy massive quantities of inventory. After some digging, I stumbled upon the world of dropshipping. For those of you unfamiliar with dropshipping, it's a business model where you sell products online without having to handle any inventory yourself. Essentially, when someone buys a product from your website, the order is sent to a third-party supplier who then ships the item directly to the customer. All you have to do is market the product and make the sale. I was hooked. This could work. It required minimal investment, and I could run it from home in my spare time. I decided to dive in head first. The first thing I did was choose a niche. I spent hours going down different rabbit holes: health and wellness, beauty, tech gadgets, fashion, you name it. I finally settled on a small, yet growing, niche: eco-friendly home products. The demand for sustainability was growing, and I believed I could build a brand around it. Next, I built a website. I had zero web development experience, but thankfully, platforms like Shopify made it easy to set up an online store without any coding knowledge. I spent every evening after work watching YouTube tutorials and trying to figure out how to make my website look professional. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to launch. I found a supplier who offered high-quality products, connected them to my store, and began working on marketing. At first, the sales were slow, really slow. Like 1 or 2 a week. I was disheartened but kept at it. I ran Facebook ads, Instagram promotions, and even set up an influencer marketing campaign. But no matter how much money I spent on ads, the results were just not coming in fast enough. I wanted to quit. I felt like I had made a huge mistake. The 9 to 5 job I hated suddenly seemed like the easier path. Then, one day, I received an order for 5 items. It wasn't a huge deal, but for some reason, that small order lit a fire in me. I realized that my marketing was starting to work. Slowly but surely, people were finding my store. I decided to double down and invest more into the ads. I tweaked my website, changed the product descriptions, and focused on improving my customer service. Around the 6-month mark, things really started to click. The sales began to increase steadily, and my profits started to grow. I went from making a couple $100 a month to consistently bringing in thousands. The more I learned, the more I optimized my processes. I understood my target audience better. I knew which products were selling best, and I refined my ads for maximum impact. Eventually, I realized I didn't need the marketing firm job anymore. I had reached a point where my business was making enough money to sustain itself, and I felt confident in my ability to scale. I put in my notice and went full-time with my dropshipping business. It was terrifying, walking away from a stable paycheck, but I knew it was the right decision. Fast forward a year later, and my eco-friendly home product store has grown beyond what I could have imagined. I've expanded to a full team, hired a customer service rep, and even started to manufacture some of my own products. My company is doing 6 figures a year in revenue, and I'm able to take time off when I want, work from anywhere, and focus on the things that truly matter to me. It's not perfect, and I still make mistakes, but every day I get to wake up and do something I love. Looking back, it feels like a lifetime ago that I was sitting in my cubicle, dreading each day. I've learned so much about business, failure, and perseverance. There were so many nights I wanted to quit, so many moments where I thought I wasn't cut out for this. But I kept going, kept pushing, and eventually it paid off. To anyone reading this, if you're stuck in a job you hate or wondering if you should take the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple: take action. Start small, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. Failure isn't the end. It's a lesson that will bring you closer to your goal. You've got to trust yourself, believe in your ability to figure things out, and be persistent. It won't be easy, but I promise you, it will be worth it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I always thought that my story would end up just like the others, the typical story of a young entrepreneur who struggled, fought tooth and nail to reach success, only to have it all come crashing down in a moment of weakness. But my story is different, and I'm telling it now because it might help someone who's stuck in the trenches, wondering if they should keep going. It all started when I was 26. I had just quit my corporate job at a mid-level marketing firm. The company had been great to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting my potential. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy the work. I did, but I always had this idea in the back of my mind that I could be doing more, creating something bigger, something that was mine. A part of me wanted to prove that I wasn't just another cog in the machine. I had a small savings cushion, about $15,000 from my time working at the firm. I knew that if I failed, I'd have to start over, but I didn't care. The itch to build something from scratch was overwhelming. So, I went all in. I decided to launch a business in the health and wellness space, an area I was passionate about. I knew how important mental and physical health were, but I was frustrated by how inaccessible some of the products and services in this space were. I wanted to change that. I took the plunge and invested all my savings into creating an online platform for wellness coaching. The goal was to provide affordable and high-quality coaching to anyone who wanted it, regardless of their budget. It wasn't a new concept, but I thought there was a gap in the market for truly personalized services that didn't break the bank. I was going to offer a premium service at an affordable price, and I had a clear vision of how to do it. But let me tell you, no amount of preparation can ever fully prepare you for the reality of starting a business. There are so many things you don't know until you're in the thick of it. The website I built was clunky, the marketing I put out was too vague, and I spent the first few months just trying to figure out how to reach people. I wasn't making sales, I wasn't getting any attention, and all I could think was that I had made a huge mistake. The worst part was that I wasn't getting any feedback. It was like my website existed in a vacuum. I knew the service I was offering could make a difference, but I had no idea how to tell people about it. I spent nights lying awake, staring at my phone, scrolling through marketing forums, trying to find any advice that might give me the breakthrough I desperately needed. After about 6 months, I found myself in a panic. I drained my savings, had racked up some credit card debt trying to pay for ads, and was still in the same place I had been when I started, no customers. There were moments where I thought, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But then, I heard about a local entrepreneur event, a meetup where people shared their experiences and connected. Desperate for a change, I decided to attend. I didn't know anyone there, but I figured I had nothing to lose. At the event, I met a woman who was running a successful fitness business. She had been in the game for years and offered online coaching, much like I did. She was kind enough to talk to me for a bit after her speech. I told her about my struggles and how I was on the brink of giving up. She listened patiently and then shared a piece of advice that completely changed the way I looked at my business. "You're doing everything right," she said, "but you're not focusing on your customers' pain points. You're so caught up in offering what you think is best that you haven't asked your audience what they need." That struck me like a lightning bolt. She was absolutely right. I was offering what I thought people needed, not what they actually wanted. I took her advice to heart. The next day, I set up a survey and reached out to people who had shown interest in my platform but hadn't signed up. I offered a free consultation in exchange for their feedback. To my surprise, I received a lot of responses, and many of them had similar issues. They wanted more than just generic advice. They wanted a personal connection. They didn't want to pay hundreds of dollars for a coaching session that didn't feel tailored to their unique needs. The feedback was invaluable. Armed with this information, I revamped my approach. I started offering free content, blogs, videos, and interactive quizzes that spoke directly to the problems people were facing. I tailored my coaching sessions to individual goals and challenges, and I began to market these changes more effectively, focusing on personal stories from clients and real success cases. Within 3 months, my sales started to pick up. Slowly but surely, I began to build a community around my business. I wasn't just selling a service anymore. I was offering solutions to real problems. People were responding, and I was seeing a steady stream of new customers. I couldn't believe it. The transformation was slow, but it was happening. One of the most important turning points came when I decided to launch a challenge for my community. I offered a 30-day wellness challenge where participants could join for free, but they had to commit to daily check-ins and tracking their progress. The challenge was a hit. It allowed me to build a strong relationship with participants while showcasing the results of my coaching. By the end of the month, many of the challenge participants became paying clients. That's when things really started to take off. I was able to build momentum, and once I had a solid customer base, I started focusing on scaling. I reinvested profits into expanding my team, creating more resources, and launching new products, such as personalized meal plans and guided workout programs. Fast forward to today, and I now run a 7-figure business with a team of 10 people. We've worked with thousands of clients across the globe, and I've been able to provide jobs and create a community of people who genuinely care about health and wellness. But the journey hasn't been easy. It's been a lot of trial and error, a lot of self-doubt, and countless moments where I considered quitting. Looking back, the key to my success wasn't about having the perfect idea or the best product from the start. It was about adapting, learning from my mistakes, and listening to the people who mattered most, my customers. I had to let go of my ego and understand that it wasn't about me. It was about them. So, if you're stuck in your business, or if you're wondering if it's time to give up, remember this. The road to success isn't linear. It's filled with setbacks, mistakes, and moments of doubt. But if you keep learning, keep iterating, and keep putting your customers first, you might just find that success is closer than you think. I always thought entrepreneurship was reserved for people who were born with a hustle gene, or who had some kind of magical knowledge that gave them a leg up. Little did I know, I was about to prove myself wrong in the most unexpected way. Let me start by saying I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I was just a regular 9 to 5 worker trying to make a decent living. I graduated with a degree in marketing, but it didn't take long for me to realize that corporate life wasn't my thing. The constant grind, the back-and-forth emails, and the endless meetings drained me. I was comfortable, yes, but I felt like I was stuck in a loop. I wanted more, but I didn't know what more looked like. Then came the tipping point. My father, who had always been my biggest supporter, fell ill. It wasn't a huge surprise. He had been battling chronic health issues for years, but it hit me harder than I expected. He had always been a small business owner, running a modest hardware store in our neighborhood. It wasn't a flashy operation, but it was his life. I remember growing up, seeing how much pride he took in his work. The store wasn't just a place for tools. It was a community hub where people came for advice, friendship, and everything in between. When he got sick, it became clear that the store wasn't going to run itself. I stepped in to help, thinking it would just be a temporary arrangement. I was just filling in for a while, no big deal, right? But as I spent more time there, something started to shift. I began to see the business in a completely different light. I realized that my dad's store was a goldmine, one that had been overlooked for years. It wasn't the products that made the store special. It was the relationships. My father had built a loyal customer base over the years, and they weren't just buying tools, they were buying trust. They came to him not just for nails and hammers, but for advice on how to fix a leaky pipe or which paint would be best for their garage walls. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was a business that was just waiting to be revitalized. But I had no idea how to run a business. Sure, I had some marketing experience, but that didn't mean I knew how to balance books or manage inventory. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something huge. So, I dove in headfirst. I spent sleepless nights reading about business management, online forums, and watching every YouTube video I could find about small business growth. I was on a mission to turn this little hardware store into something far more than it had ever been. The first thing I did was evaluate the current state of the store. We were stuck in the 80s. There was no online presence, no social media, no real marketing beyond word of mouth. The store was stagnant, and I knew I needed to shake things up. I decided to start small. I created a Facebook page and an Instagram account for the store. At first, it felt weird, posting pictures of screws and drills on social media, but I soon realized that people were responding. They weren't just liking the posts, they were commenting, asking questions, and engaging. I also started offering small promotions, like discounts on specific products for the week, and that helped get people talking. Next, I tackled the store's website. It was outdated and clunky, but I knew it could be the key to reaching a wider audience. After working with a local web designer, we launched a fresh, user-friendly site with an online store. At first, the online orders were slow, but over time, they started to trickle in. I remember the first time we received an order from a customer outside our local area. I was ecstatic. It wasn't just a local business anymore. It was becoming something more. And the more we focused on customer service, the more people spread the word about our little store. Despite all the progress, I still had a long way to go. The business was picking up, but I was still learning the ropes. One of the biggest challenges was managing cash flow. There were times when it felt like the store was doing great, but we didn't have enough money to pay for new inventory. I quickly realized that the key to staying afloat wasn't just making sales, it was managing the money properly. So, I hired an accountant to help me get a handle on our finances, and it was a game changer. With their help, we put together a budget and figured out how to better track expenses. But the real turning point came when I decided to expand our product offerings. I started reaching out to local manufacturers and suppliers, trying to get exclusive deals that no one else in the area had. It wasn't easy, and it took a lot of negotiating, but eventually we started carrying products that no one else had in stock. I also created partnerships with local contractors, offering them bulk discounts in exchange for their business. It was a win-win for both sides. As the business continued to grow, I realized that I had to hire a team. I couldn't do everything myself, and the last thing I wanted was for the quality of service to slip because I was stretched too thin. I started with just one part-time employee to help manage the shop, but as things took off, I had to bring in more staff. I learned quickly that hiring the right people was crucial to success. I needed people who shared the same vision and passion for the business that I had. Finding the right fit was tough, but once I did, it made all the difference. Fast forward a few years, and the business was almost unrecognizable. We had expanded to multiple locations, hired dozens of employees, and our online presence was stronger than ever. We had even begun offering DIY workshops, where customers could come in and learn how to tackle home improvement projects on their own. It was something I never could have imagined in the beginning. The most surprising part of it all was how much I had grown. I was no longer the person who had felt trapped in a corporate job. I was a business owner, a leader, and someone who had transformed a small, family-owned hardware store into a thriving, multi-location business. Looking back, I realized that none of this would have been possible without my father's influence. His work ethic, his ability to build relationships, and his love for the community laid the foundation for everything that came after. I may have been the one who took the store to the next level, but his legacy was the thing that made it all possible. The lesson I've learned is simple. Entrepreneurship doesn't always start with a grand idea or a stroke of genius. Sometimes, it starts with stepping into a role that you never expected to play and learning to trust the process. And most importantly, it's about understanding that success is never overnight. It's the result of hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. I never imagined that I'd become an entrepreneur. But here I am, managing a business that I'm incredibly proud of, and I'm more grateful than ever for the lessons I've learned along the way. The journey isn't easy, but if you're willing to put in the work, it's worth every second. I started my entrepreneurial journey in a way that probably seems pretty typical. I had no clue what I was doing, and I was hoping that my passion for solving problems would be enough to make it work. But, like most stories, it didn't come together smoothly. In fact, it felt like my life was stuck in a loop of failure, confusion, and constant rethinking of what I was doing. This is the story of how I started a small tech startup that grew into something bigger than I ever thought possible, and how I almost lost everything along the way. It all began right after I graduated college. I had a degree in computer science, but no real job prospects. I wasn't one of those students who graduated with a clear plan. I didn't have a cushy internship lined up or a job offer from a tech company. All I had was a vague idea that I wanted to work for myself, make a meaningful impact, and, of course, make some money. But how? I had no idea. I was working at a local coffee shop, just scraping by, trying to figure out my next move when I met a guy named Alex. He was an older guy, maybe in his mid-40s, and he came into the coffee shop every morning to work on his laptop. I struck up a conversation with him, and it turned out he was a software developer who'd been running his own small tech company for the past decade. He had some success, but wasn't really growing as fast as he wanted. We started meeting after hours, and over coffee, he would talk about the challenges of entrepreneurship, the struggles of balancing clients, managing teams, and keeping up with industry trends. One day, he casually mentioned a problem that many startups face: the lack of quality customer support. It was an offhand comment, but it stuck with me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there might be something to it. At the time, I was working with several small companies, and they all struggled with customer support. They didn't have the resources to hire dedicated teams, and the tools they used were either too complicated or too expensive. That's when the idea hit me. What if I could build a simple, affordable customer support platform specifically tailored for small businesses? It wouldn't have all the bells and whistles that enterprise solutions offered, but it would do the job well, and it would be easy to use. I ran the idea by Alex, and surprisingly, he was interested. We agreed to work together, and after a couple of months of late-night brainstorming and development, we had a basic prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. We put together a landing page, set up a simple blog, and began to market our product. We were ready to go. But here's the thing: no one cared. We launched our product with all the excitement and energy you could expect from a couple of fresh-faced entrepreneurs, only to realize that no one was signing up. Our landing page didn't convert, our blog posts barely got any traction, and we weren't getting any leads. It felt like we were shouting into the void. For the first few months, we burned through money like crazy. We paid for ads that didn't convert. We tried outreach emails that went unanswered. And we were spending countless hours tweaking our product, but we weren't getting any feedback that would help us improve it. We were frustrated and almost ready to give up. It was around that time that I had a breakthrough. I went back to my roots as a developer and started paying attention to the data. I realized that we were building a product in a vacuum. We didn't know what our target audience truly wanted or needed. We were just assuming. I dug deeper into our metrics, and that's when I noticed something odd. The people who were visiting our site weren't coming for our customer support platform at all. They were more interested in a specific feature we had added that allowed businesses to automate certain parts of their customer service. That was the key. We had been so focused on building a full-service customer support platform that we hadn't paid enough attention to the actual needs of small businesses. We shifted our focus to building a more robust automation tool, something that was easy to integrate and didn't require an entire overhaul of a company's existing customer service system. We relaunched the product, focusing on the automation feature, and this time, we started to see results. Slowly but surely, customers started to trickle in. We made our first sale, then a few more. We refined our messaging, made the automation feature even better, and eventually, we were able to grow our user base to a few hundred paying customers. It wasn't huge, but it was a start. Then, disaster struck. About 6 months after we started seeing some momentum, Alex pulled me aside one evening. He told me he needed to leave the business. Apparently, personal issues had come up, and he could no longer commit the time and energy to the company. It was a punch to the gut. I was devastated. We had just started to make real progress, and now I was faced with the reality of running the business alone. I didn't know what to do. I considered folding the company and walking away, but something inside me refused to give up. I thought back to everything I had learned during the past year, and I realized I couldn't let it all go to waste. I decided to keep pushing forward, but this time, I was going to do it on my own terms. The next few months were a blur. I worked around the clock to keep the company running. I recruited a small team, mostly freelancers, to help with development and marketing. I was managing everything: sales, customer support, product development, you name it. It was exhausting, but I knew I had no other choice. Eventually, my hard work started to pay off. I reached out to investors, and after several failed pitches, I finally got a meeting with one who seemed genuinely interested in our product. I was able to secure seed funding that allowed us to grow the team and improve the product. We added new features, streamlined the user interface, and expanded our marketing efforts. Within 2 years, we went from a small project I almost abandoned to a fully fledged startup with tens of thousands of customers. The stress, the failures, and the uncertainty had all led to this point. I wasn't rich, but I was living the life I had always dreamed of: being my own boss, running a successful company, and creating something that helped people. The hardest lesson I learned throughout this journey is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a series of small wins and losses, adjustments, and constant learning. There were so many times I thought I was done, but I kept going. If I had given up at any point along the way, I wouldn't be where I am now. And to anyone who's thinking about starting their own business, I say this: the road is going to be rough. You're going to face moments where you doubt everything. But if you can push through those moments, there's a chance you'll come out the other side stronger and more prepared for the challenges ahead. Just don't quit too soon. I used to be a regular guy working a 9-to-5 job, just like anyone else. I wasn't particularly ambitious, nor did I have any grand plans for my life. But there was one thing I did know: I was never satisfied. I spent my days at a desk, staring at a computer screen, daydreaming of a different life. I envied the stories I heard about people who had created businesses from scratch and made a living doing something they loved. Deep down, I wanted that for myself, but I just didn't know how to make it happen. It all started one evening when I was watching a documentary about small businesses and the entrepreneurs who built them. One story in particular stood out to me. A man had started his company in his garage with almost no money to his name, using just his knowledge and passion for the product. His brand had exploded in popularity, and now, years later, he was worth millions. I couldn't get that story out of my head. I remember sitting in my living room that night, feeling inspired but also terrified. Could I do that? Could I go from the safety of my regular job to something so uncertain? I thought about the risks: losing money, failing, disappointing my family and friends, and for a moment, I almost backed out. But then, something inside me clicked. I realized that I had nothing to lose. I was already miserable at my desk job. If I didn't take a chance, I'd never know what could have been. The next day, I started researching. I had no business experience, but I was determined to learn. I spent hours reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and attending free online webinars. I focused on one industry that had always fascinated me: health and fitness. I had spent years working out at the gym, experimenting with diets, and understanding the science behind fitness. I figured if I was going to build something, it should be in a field that I knew well and was passionate about. I started small, like most entrepreneurs do. I created a website and a social media presence, hoping to attract an audience. The idea was simple: create a platform where people could find the best workout plans, nutritional advice, and wellness tips. At the time, I had no real strategy, but I poured my heart into the project. I posted daily, engaging with followers and trying to build a community. I was hoping that over time, I would gain traction. It was slow going at first. In fact, the first few months were incredibly discouraging. My website got little traffic, and my social media engagement was minimal. I started questioning whether I had made the right decision. Maybe I was just another dreamer chasing a pipe dream. But then, one day, something changed. A post I had written about a simple workout routine went viral. Suddenly, people were sharing my content, tagging their friends, and reaching out for advice. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me a sense of hope. I took that momentum and ran with it. I began working harder than ever, learning everything I could about SEO, digital marketing, and building a brand. I started collaborating with influencers in the health and fitness space, which gave me a bigger platform and exposed me to a larger audience. Slowly but surely, my online presence grew. But then came the hard part: monetizing my platform. I had no idea how to turn my passion into a sustainable business. I had seen others make money through affiliate marketing and product sales, so I decided to give it a try. I reached out to fitness equipment companies and health supplement brands, pitching them on the idea of promoting their products on my platform. To my surprise, a few brands responded, and they were willing to pay me for sponsored posts and affiliate marketing. At first, the money was small, but it was enough to prove that my efforts were paying off. I reinvested every dollar back into the business, hiring a small team to help with content creation, marketing, and customer service. I expanded my offerings, creating online fitness courses, selling workout plans, and eventually launching my own line of fitness gear. I was still a long way from being rich, but I could see the possibilities unfolding before me. Over the next couple of years, my brand continued to grow. I was able to quit my day job and focus on my business full-time. I hired more people, expanded my product offerings, and even opened a physical store. It felt like a dream. But, as every entrepreneur knows, success doesn't come without its challenges. There were times when I thought I had it all figured out, only for something unexpected to throw me off course. The economy would shift, new competitors would emerge, and sometimes it felt like everything I had built was at risk of crumbling. There were moments when I wanted to quit. I would lie awake at night, stressing over the future of my business. But then, I would remind myself of why I started in the first place, to build something meaningful, something I could be proud of. I had come too far to give up now. Looking back, I realized that the most important thing I did was just keep going. I didn't have the perfect plan, and I certainly didn't have all the answers. But I took action. I learned from my mistakes, adjusted my strategy, and kept pushing forward. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Now my business is thriving. I have a loyal customer base, a dedicated team, and the freedom to work on my own terms. I'm not a millionaire yet, but I'm comfortable and doing something that I love. I've learned that entrepreneurship is a journey, one that requires persistence, resilience, and a lot of hard work. I often think back to that documentary I watched years ago. It inspired me to take a leap of faith and pursue my dream. And while my journey is far from over, I know one thing for sure: I will never go back to a desk job. The lessons I've learned along the way have shaped me into someone who understands that success doesn't come overnight. It takes time, effort, and an unwavering belief in yourself. If you're out there, stuck in a job you don't love, I urge you to take that first step. It's terrifying, it's risky, but it's also the only way to find out what you're truly capable of. And trust me, once you take that leap, there's no going back. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. There weren't a lot of opportunities for someone like me, especially someone who wasn't interested in the usual career paths. I didn't want to be a teacher, doctor, or lawyer, which was the common dream for kids in my neighborhood. I wanted to do something different, something that would set me apart. But how could I? I had no money, no fancy connections, and, honestly, not much to show for myself except a passion for technology and the internet. Still, I believed that if I could just find the right idea, I could make something of myself. It all started when I was about 20. I was working a dead-end job at a local retail store, barely making ends meet. One evening, as I was browsing the web in my off hours, I stumbled upon an online forum discussing dropshipping. It was one of those moments where everything clicked. I had no clue what dropshipping really was, but it sounded like a way to make money online without having to buy inventory up front. To someone like me, who had zero capital, this was a dream come true. I spent the next few weeks learning everything I could about dropshipping. I read countless blogs, watched YouTube videos, and joined online communities. I was hooked, but I also realized that a lot of people were talking about it, meaning the market was becoming more saturated. Still, I thought, if I could find the right niche, there might still be an opportunity for me. I didn't have any startup capital, so I started with what little savings I had. I managed to scrape together $200, which I used to buy a course that promised to teach everything I needed to know about dropshipping. I didn't have much to lose, and at that point, I was willing to invest any money I had to get a chance at a better life. I followed the course step by step. I created an online store, picked a few products, and launched my first ad campaign on Facebook. I spent hours tweaking my store, making sure the product descriptions were perfect, and designing ads that I thought would catch people's attention. But nothing happened. Days passed, then weeks. I didn't make a single sale. At first, I was devastated. But instead of quitting, I decided to double down. I realized that I hadn't done enough market research. I needed to find a product that people actually wanted to buy. So, I took a different approach. I joined niche Facebook groups, searched Instagram for trending products, and paid attention to what people were posting online. After weeks of research, I found a product that seemed to be in demand but wasn't widely available in my area, a portable blender. It wasn't a revolutionary product, but it was something that could appeal to a wide audience. People loved the idea of being able to make smoothies or shakes on the go. I felt confident this could work, so I revamped my store, focused my ads on this specific product, and relaunched my campaign. The first day, I didn't make a sale. The second day, still nothing. But on the third day, I woke up to a notification. I had made my first sale. It wasn't much, just $35, but it felt like a victory. That $35 changed everything for me. I felt like I had unlocked a secret. The feeling of making money while I slept was surreal. I kept reinvesting the small profits back into ads, refining my marketing strategy, and optimizing my website. Slowly but surely, sales started trickling in. Over the course of the next few months, I managed to scale the business to a point where I was making a few $1,000s per month. But that's when the real challenge began. As my business grew, so did my problems. I was dealing with more customer complaints than I was prepared for. Some people received their products late, some didn't receive them at all, and others were dissatisfied with the quality. I realized that dropshipping wasn't as hands-off as I'd imagined. I was essentially acting as a middleman, and the customer experience wasn't entirely in my control. To solve this, I had to make a choice. I could either continue dealing with customer complaints and risking my reputation, or I could take a more hands-on approach and find a way to control the product sourcing myself. After a lot of consideration, I decided to switch to a private label model. I worked with manufacturers directly and branded the products as my own. This gave me more control over the quality and delivery times. The transition wasn't easy. I had to save up money for initial bulk orders and deal with the logistics of warehousing and shipping. But within a year of making the switch, my business was thriving. I had a small team working for me, and we were processing hundreds of orders every day. The portable blender, which started as a side project, was now the main product in a much larger business. But just when I thought I had figured it out, the landscape of e-commerce began to change. Facebook ads, which had been the bread and butter of my marketing strategy, were becoming less effective. The cost of advertising was rising, and I had to pivot again. I started experimenting with influencer marketing and built partnerships with people in the health and fitness space. This move proved to be a game changer. I also diversified my product line. I added a few complementary items like protein powder shakers, water bottles, and meal prep containers. Slowly but surely, I built a brand around health and convenience, and it began to resonate with a larger audience. By the time I was 25, I had turned my small side hustle into a full-fledged business. My team had grown, and we were pulling in 7 figures annually. It wasn't easy, and I faced more than my fair share of setbacks, but I had learned to adapt. I was no longer just a guy selling blenders. I was a brand owner, an entrepreneur, and a problem solver. I had gone from working at a retail job to being my own boss, and I had done it all without any formal business education or a huge starting capital. Looking back, I realized that the key to my success wasn't the product or the business model. It was my willingness to keep learning, to adapt, and to keep pushing even when things weren't going my way. There were moments when I wanted to quit, moments when I thought I wasn't cut out for it. But I kept going, and that perseverance made all the difference. The hardest part of entrepreneurship, I believe, isn't finding success, it's sustaining it. There are always new challenges, new competitors, and new technologies to keep up with. But every time I face a new obstacle, I remind myself of where I started, and that keeps me motivated to push forward. Now, I'm working on expanding even further, building more brands, investing in new projects, and continuing to learn and grow. I'm not done yet, but I'm proud of how far I've come. From that first $200 investment to now, it's been a wild ride, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. If you're just starting out or thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: don't give up. It's going to be hard, and there will be times when you doubt yourself, but keep going. Learn as much as you can, be willing to adapt, and embrace the setbacks as learning opportunities. The road isn't straight, but if you keep moving forward, you'll get there. This is the story of how I went from being broke and jobless to owning a small but thriving tech company, all because of a single decision that changed my life forever. It all started back in 2015. I was 24 years old, freshly graduated from college, and living with my parents in a small town. I had a degree in computer science, but at that point, it felt like that degree meant nothing. Every job I applied for wanted experience, and every job I got was either too low paying or not in my field. The dream of working in tech seemed like a far-off fantasy, not something that could realistically happen. In the meantime, I spent my days bouncing between temp jobs and late-night coding sessions in my bedroom. I knew that if I wanted to make something of myself, I needed to take risks. But at the same time, I felt stuck. I had zero savings and, as the weeks went by, I got more and more discouraged. Then one day, while scrolling through Reddit, looking for answers, as usual, I stumbled across a post about a guy who had quit his day job to start a web design company. The more I read, the more I realized this wasn't some far-off dream for someone else. This was real. This was something that could happen if you just took the leap. The post stuck with me. I didn't know anything about running a business, let alone starting one, but I knew something had to change. I spent the next few days reading everything I could find about entrepreneurship, business models, and the tech industry. I was particularly drawn to the idea of starting a small tech company offering services like web development and digital marketing. Sure, I wasn't a marketing expert, but I knew I could hire people who were. By the end of the week, I had a rough idea for what I wanted to do. I decided to offer web development services to local businesses that didn't have an online presence. I called the company ByteShift, a name I came up with in 30 minutes while brainstorming. Now, I had zero money to start this business. I didn't have the resources to hire a full-time team or invest in fancy marketing campaigns. But what I did have was time, and I was willing to spend every waking moment working on this. I borrowed a small amount of money from my parents to cover the basics, like setting up a website and purchasing some simple advertising. I didn't want to ask for too much, as I already felt guilty for being dependent on them at my age. I knew the hardest part would be getting clients. I didn't have any portfolio, and I didn't have a reputation. So, I did what any desperate entrepreneur would do. I cold called local businesses. And by cold call, I mean I sent hundreds of cold emails. I didn't expect much, but I figured I'd try to convince a few small companies to take a chance on me. One afternoon, I got a reply from a local bakery that needed a new website. They had an outdated, terrible one, and they'd been looking for someone to fix it. The owner, Maria, seemed genuinely interested, and after a 20-minute phone call, she agreed to hire me for the job. The contract was small, just a few $100, but it was the first real gig I had ever gotten. I poured everything into that project. I worked day and night to make sure the website was perfect, and I didn't take a penny until I had delivered a product that Maria was happy with. When the site was live, she was over the moon. She sent me a thank you card, and I could tell she was thrilled with how it turned out. In a small town like mine, word of mouth was everything. Soon enough, other businesses started noticing. I landed a couple more small contracts, including a local gym and a law firm. At this point, I had made enough to cover my expenses and even hired my first freelance web developer, Tom, to help with the workload. He was a friend from college who had been in the same boat as me and was looking for opportunities. But things didn't go smoothly all the time. A few months into the business, I realized I had made a major mistake. I had been so focused on delivering the best product that I completely ignored marketing. My revenue was growing slowly, but it wasn't enough to sustain the business in the long term. I was burning through the small savings I had and could sense that I needed to either scale quickly or risk shutting everything down. In desperation, I started reading more about digital marketing. I learned how to optimize the website for search engines, use social media effectively, and run ad campaigns that actually brought in new leads. I spent hours learning the basics of Google Ads and Facebook ads. Slowly, I started to see results. My website began ranking higher in search results, and my client list started growing. After about a year, ByteShift wasn't just a side project anymore. I had a small team of developers, marketers, and designers. The business was profitable, and I was finally able to pay myself a reasonable salary. We were even getting referrals from larger companies who appreciated the work we were doing for smaller businesses. The whole experience felt like a roller coaster of ups and downs, but with every setback, I learned something new. Each mistake became a lesson I could use to improve the company. Fast forward to 2018, and we had grown to a team of 12 full-time employees. I was working long hours, but I was happier than ever. ByteShift was no longer just a survival project. It was a real, thriving company. We had expanded our services to include custom software development and consulting. I even started working on an in-house product, a mobile app for small business owners to manage their operations. It wasn't ready yet, but I was hopeful it could be the next big thing. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far we've come. In just a few years, ByteShift has gone from a one-man operation to a small but successful tech company. Of course, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows. There were many sleepless nights and moments when I questioned whether I had made the right decision. But in the end, it was the willingness to take risks and keep pushing forward that made the difference. I'm not a millionaire yet, but I've learned a ton about business, leadership, and what it really takes to make it as an entrepreneur. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone who is thinking about starting a business, it's this: don't wait for the perfect moment. There's no such thing. Start with what you have, learn as you go, and never stop improving. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. If I can do it, anyone can. I started my journey as an entrepreneur back in 2017, but it wasn't until 2020 that things really took off. It's funny how success can feel like a culmination of years of small decisions, failures, and a lot of hard work. I had no idea that starting my own business would change my life in the way it did. Here's how it happened. I was working at a digital marketing agency, and while I had a comfortable job, I always felt like I was missing something. I could see the potential for growth, but it wasn't my vision, and I wasn't feeling challenged enough. So, I started dabbling in side projects, small gigs here and there, but nothing substantial. One day, during a particularly frustrating day at work, I realized that if I was going to ever break free, I had to do it myself. I didn't want to keep working for someone else and miss out on my own potential. That's when I decided to take the leap and start my own business. I didn't have much saved up, just enough to live on for a few months. I had a solid background in digital marketing, so I figured I could start a freelance marketing consultancy. I launched my website, designed my business cards, and nervously posted on LinkedIn that I was available for hire. I still remember the first client I landed. It was a small business, just like me, struggling to get by in the competitive world of online marketing. They hired me for a basic social media management job, and it didn't pay much, but it was a start. At first, everything felt like a grind. I worked nights and weekends, taking on as many clients as I could. I barely slept, constantly hustling, trying to juggle multiple projects while keeping up with the ever-changing world of digital marketing. I would get up at 6 a.m., work a full-time job, and then dive straight into my side business. There were times I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. The fear of failure was overwhelming. I didn't want to lose everything I had worked for. After 6 months of this, things were still not going as well as I hoped. I had a handful of clients, but it wasn't enough to sustain me full-time. I started feeling like I was stuck in a cycle of chasing clients without really building a sustainable business. That's when I decided to take a risk. I started focusing on building my own product. I thought, what if I could create something that could help other small business owners like myself? What if I could scale it beyond my own time? I had always been passionate about automation and systems, so I decided to create a software tool that would help businesses automate their social media content. The idea was to create a simple platform where businesses could schedule their posts, track engagement, and get real-time analytics. At the time, there were plenty of tools out there, but they were either too expensive or too complicated for small businesses to use. I wanted to make it affordable and easy to use. I spent the next 6 months developing the platform. It wasn't easy, especially since I didn't have a technical co-founder. I had to learn how to code basic elements of the software myself, hire freelancers, and manage the project while still working with my clients. There were so many nights when I thought about giving up. The pressure was immense. But I kept pushing forward, always telling myself that if I could just get this software out, it would change everything. In early 2020, I launched the beta version of my software. I sent emails to everyone I knew in the industry, offering them a free trial in exchange for feedback. To my surprise, people actually started using it. At first, the feedback was rough, but I appreciated it because it gave me the chance to make improvements. Every bug fix, every new feature, made the platform a little bit better. By mid-2020, the pandemic hit, and businesses were scrambling to adapt to the new digital-first world. More than ever, they needed tools that could help them maintain an online presence without overwhelming themselves. My software started gaining traction, especially among small business owners who were trying to stay afloat in a difficult market. The revenue grew, and so did my client base. I had gone from barely being able to sustain myself to making enough money to hire a small team. I knew I couldn't do this alone anymore. I started hiring people to handle customer service, marketing, and development. The team I built was small but passionate, and we all shared the same vision, to create a tool that would help businesses succeed online. Every new hire felt like a milestone, But it also brought new challenges. Managing a team, ensuring quality, keeping up with the pace of growth, these were things I had never done before. I learned a lot about leadership, communication, and scaling during those first few years. It wasn't always smooth, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. By 2022, my company had grown significantly. We had a steady stream of clients, a product that people loved, and a team that was fully invested in our mission. I was no longer working 80-hour weeks, but the work didn't feel like work anymore. It was fulfilling in a way that I had never experienced before. I could finally step back and focus on the bigger picture, expanding our product, improving customer experience, and exploring new markets. We had built a solid foundation, and I felt like we were just getting started. The journey wasn't easy. There were so many moments when I doubted myself, when I thought I wasn't good enough, when I wanted to quit. But in the end, I realized that those were the moments that made me stronger. They taught me resilience, patience, and the importance of persistence. Today, my business is thriving, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But I know it's not the destination that matters, it's the journey. Looking back, I never would have guessed that I'd be where I am today. I've built something that I'm proud of. I've learned more than I could have imagined, and I've met so many amazing people along the way. If you're thinking about starting your own business, just know that it's not easy, but it's worth it. It takes time, effort, and a whole lot of faith in yourself. But if you keep going, you'll get there. And anyone who feels like giving up, don't. You're closer than you think. I've been an entrepreneur for the past 7 years, and what I've learned has changed my life in ways I never imagined. The path hasn't been easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding, both financially and personally. I want to share my story because I know it could help others who are just starting out or thinking about taking the leap. It all started when I was 25. I had just graduated college with a degree in marketing, and I was working a regular 9-to-5 job. It wasn't a bad job, but it wasn't something I was passionate about either. I spent my days helping a small company with their social media strategy, creating content, and analyzing data. The pay was decent, and the hours were predictable, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more for me out there. I felt like I was made to do something bigger. One day, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I stumbled upon a small e-commerce brand that was making waves in the beauty industry. They had a unique product, a simple website, and an impressive social media presence. What caught my attention wasn't just their success, but the fact that they were a small team, basically just a couple of people working out of their garage. It wasn't a massive company, but they were making real money, and they seemed happy. That was the moment when I realized that I could do this too. I didn't have to stick to the predictable path I was on. I didn't have to wait for the perfect job or the perfect circumstances. I could create something for myself. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to give it a shot. I started brainstorming ideas. I knew I wanted to create something in the beauty space because I had always been interested in skincare and self-care. I spent weeks researching products, reading customer reviews, and figuring out what people wanted. I eventually decided to create a line of organic skincare products. It wasn't groundbreaking, but I thought I could create a niche by focusing on clean, affordable, and effective products that didn't rely on a ton of marketing fluff. I had no experience in product development or manufacturing, and I definitely didn't have any connections in the beauty industry. But I didn't let that stop me. I spent months learning about product ingredients, formulations, and the best suppliers. I reached out to people who were in the business, asked questions, and even made a few mistakes along the way. The biggest hurdle was finding a manufacturer that could produce my products at a reasonable price without compromising quality. It took months to find a reliable partner, but I finally found a small manufacturer that was willing to work with me. The catch was that they required a minimum order quantity, MOQ, that was higher than what I was ready to commit to. I was staring at an inventory bill that would take months to pay off. But I took the risk. I put my savings into the business and placed the order. It was terrifying, but I knew that this was the moment I had to take if I wanted to make it work. As the products arrived, I knew that there was no turning back. This was real. Next came the website. I didn't have much experience in web design, so I hired a freelance designer to create a simple, user-friendly site. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was clean, professional, and aligned with my brand. I also spent countless hours learning how to set up an e-commerce platform, handle customer service, and optimize my site for SEO. There were a lot of late nights, but I loved every minute of it. Once the website was live, I started promoting my products on social media. I used Instagram, Facebook, and even TikTok to showcase my products, share my story, and connect with potential customers. I knew that my biggest asset at the time was my authenticity. I wasn't some big corporation with a huge marketing budget. I was just one person trying to make it work. But even with all my efforts, sales didn't come easily. The first few months were incredibly slow. I was lucky if I made a couple of sales a day. I spent hours each day posting, engaging with followers, and trying to get the word out. I also reached out to influencers and beauty bloggers, offering them free products in exchange for honest reviews. Some said yes, some said no, but slowly, things started to pick up. Then came the moment that changed everything. I got a DM from a well-known beauty influencer with over 200K followers. She had tried my products, loved them, and wanted to feature them on her Instagram page. I couldn't believe it. This was the break I had been waiting for. Within hours of her post, my website crashed from the influx of traffic. Sales soared, and I went from having a handful of customers to hundreds in a single day. That's when things started to gain real momentum. I used the revenue from those sales to reinvest in more inventory, expand my product line, and hire my first employee to help with customer service. The brand grew steadily from there. I was constantly refining my marketing, tweaking my product offerings, and finding new ways to connect with my audience. Looking back, I can see that there were a lot of times when I could have given up. I could have stuck with the 9-to-5 job, played it safe, and never taken the risk. But I'm so glad I didn't. Entrepreneurship has taught me so much about resilience, creativity, and the power of persistence. Today, my brand is worth millions. We have a full team, a loyal customer base, and a growing presence in retail stores. I've learned how to balance running a business with taking care of my mental health, and I've learned how to embrace failure as a part of the journey. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. If you're thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple: just start. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect idea. Start where you are, with what you have. Take small steps every day, and remember that every successful entrepreneur started out just like you, with an idea and a dream. I'm not saying that every day will be a success, but I can promise you that if you keep going, you will see progress. It's a long road, but the rewards are worth it. If I can do it, so can you. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.